Neet Shapes, and welcome to another edition of AniTube Digest, where we go for the best and the not so best anime YouTube videos to come out this week, from the 18th of September to the 25th of September. The first of some vids that I thought were decent. They're pretty good. And I wanted to start with a shout out with a thing I was on, Shonen Flop with David and Jordan. They were gracious enough to have me as a guest, where we talked about Standers. Stars is a Shonen Jump axed manga from 2011 that I had never heard of before. The authors haven't really gone on to do anything in particular. They were assistants to Horikoshi. I believe the next thing that one of them worked on was Moriarty, the compatriot that became an anime. That was kind of the thing that they actually got success with. But it was 39 chapters of mid. But they were really fun, really fun hosts to be a part of, and I enjoyed the conversation. It got me to check out something I had never heard of, so I didn't have any expectations or anything, because I usually, now with how long I've been into this fandom and everything, I go into a lot of stuff with at least one expectation or one preconceived notion. I kind of know some background. This, all I knew is that it was canceled after 39 chapters, right? It's like a failure in a capacity. So I think that I was worried at first that would color my impression of it, being like, oh, I'm not going to invest a whole lot of time, a lot of care, or like, I'm not going to get attached to it because I know it ends kind of prematurely or whatever. Or I would be disappointed by the ending because of its short runtime or whatever. And that wasn't as much the case, because really it just wasn't that great. That was fine. But unfortunately, it's also, a lot of it had to do with, like, really, it's not in good condition right now. It was kind of translated by fans. And that's not always a bad thing. But at one point, they lost their translator and had to translate from Japanese to Indonesian and Indonesian to English. And it's just not a great translation, I can tell, and so it was kind of a rough read in that regard. I wasn't able to kind of appreciate it in a maximum way. But even beyond that, there was a lot of kind of botched things that it did, unfortunately. But yeah, like, I had a really good conversation, and I enjoyed it, so you should check it out. And obviously, if you're interested in this kind of dive into these completely obscure titles like Stars, right? Or these other titles that, like, people have very, very little information about. A few people have talked about, of course. I think makes it really interesting. Yeah, you should check it out. Craftsdwarf is finally back, and just on a ramble about Netflix's One Piece adaptation, and it's different, and likes it. He didn't really dwell too much on, like, criticisms or anything like that. I personally might have. I certainly, when I made my thread on it, like, all I kind of focused on were the things that I didn't think worked, but everything else felt like it kind of spoke for itself. But I appreciated the Craftsdwarf really focused more on the positive aspect and the things that he appreciated and noticed, and observed the fact that, like, which is really interesting. One of the things was that, like, all the depth with Buggy and his feeling of detachment from Shang and being abandoned and everything wasn't really prevalent even in the manga by the time this was getting made. So, like, in a certain chapter, there was revelations about Buggy that had those revelations about him feeling betrayed by Shanks, of not wanting to go after the One Piece at first. And so it ended up being like he just kind of aligns the dates up, and it's like, did they have future information from Oda about where this character is supposed to go, or like what it's supposed to be? Which I think, I don't know if Kraft necessarily explicitly says that, but that sort of observation was really great. And I also really like his perspective on Zoro, despite his difference in character, which I saw one of the many things promoting Netflix One Piece was the Japanese cast talking about performing the live action components, and Zoro's actor actually talks about it. He's like, he's kind of different in this one. Zoro's kind of different here. He's not smiling or whatever, and Crafts makes a point of that, but also talking about how in a lot of ways this version of Zoro um emphasizes the things that make Luffy different or similar, and kind of like gives him a reason to join Luffy besides seemingly under duress, where he's like, all right, fine, I'll help you, I'll be part of your crew if whatever. um which I don't fully agree, because like I think, yeah, it was kind of interesting and strange how quickly Zoro was just like, all right, Captain, he was already like ride or die for Luffy like that quickly. um but then I don't know. I think that I like that about Zoro, to be honest with you. Because it just shows that he was genuinely impressed by Luffy, I guess. Um, I don't know. Not that it'd be like manga purist or anything like that. But it made for a really great payoff moment in the One Piece live action, where he's walking away and he's seeing them fight. And you're like, but then in the next cut, he's fighting with them. That is a very Zoro thing, I think, and I took it more as he can't resist a challenge. He can't resist fighting and proving himself, I guess. It wasn't necessarily like, oh, I should help those guys, there's something about them. I think it was more of an opportunity that he couldn't pass up. That's how I interpreted that scene. And because even after that scene where it looks like he's decided to join them, he insists several times for comedic effect that they're not a crew. And it is a little bit of a dissonance, right? Because it's like, yet you're going with him anyway, but you insist that you're not a crew, and that's a little weird to me. I still enjoy Zoro's presence in his interpretation in this live action. It was just things like that, kind of like, well then, but then, like that, even though it's cool in the grand scheme of things. And obviously Kraft's just analysis, the way he talks about One Piece in terms of like Zoro's perspective, and how much he's similar to Luffy, and he's the only character like Luffy who has a goal that is involved with being the best. It's not like achieving, overcoming other people. Like if you have to be the greatest swordsman or king of the pirates, it involves defeating other people. Whereas becoming the greatest doctor, or being the doctor that can cure any illness for Chopper, that's not like a competing thing, and it demonstrates it in the show itself. Same thing for Sanji or Nami. All of their goal. But the thing is, it's interesting with Usopp, because you could interpret it like being a brave warrior of the sea. Like it requires overcoming obstacles in the same way, but his is a different tier. It's not being the best at something. But it does also involve hardship in the same way. I don't know. It's interesting, but like stuff like that, which just makes it really interesting to think about, and providing plenty of examples, and feels like he's sourcing a lot, and not just kind of like speaking like in theory talk, like, oh, we know that that Mihawk can beat Shanks or in this state or whatever, like not like overindulging in that sort of scenario, and appreciating the text itself. Yeah, I do look forward to his Wano video, and other such endeavors with One Piece for sure. AniHive had a video about Hikaru no Go, and I love Hikaru no Go. One of the few, like one of 5 people who like this book, and it's a pretty typical review, I think, just kind of talking generally about the story and everything. And it's like, this is cool, and this thrillery part, and I like the focus on music during the games, because it was actually an aspect of the games that I didn't pick up on as much. I don't think I did it when I watched it. I think what really picked up for me about what made the game so engrossing was that the camera didn't often move. Like, yeah, sometimes you have like a shot of the characters putting a piece down or whatever, but a lot of the time Hikaru no Go would just have a top-down perspective, would show the entire board, and it would linger on that for a long time, and you just place it on the board, and like a little pause, and another character would play something, and it would be kind of slow, but it was like real-time movement, a real time just demonstrating it. And I mean, he is right, where the show does not do an amazing job at explaining what the game is and like how do you play it, and how do you know when someone's winning, right? Uh, it's not really the show for that. But honestly, I really enjoy it for that because like it exploits the fact that it can tell a really great story and you get attached to the characters and you're not necessarily in it for the game. I really like that about it because it reminds me of my one of my earliest videos that got blocked, so you can't really watch it, and most people probably maybe don't even know that I made one. I made a video. My second video ever was about Ashinojo and Hajime no Ippo. How what is Roger knows the Roger knows like not taking it seriously. It's I don't remember the catchphrase I gave it, but it was like a certain thing. I actually don't remember. I can't remember it right now off the top of my head. But the idea is that like Ippo's about boxing. You learn about boxing, you get into boxing. It doesn't end up mattering whether it's Ippo boxing or somebody else. You kind of just are there for the boxing. And that's fine. That's great. It's really a high octane and cool and fun. And I still like the characters and the story that it's telling with Takamura and everything like that. But it's about boxing. You really understand the different techniques and strategies and nuances and all that. Joe is not. Joe is like, just punch the guy. And like, and it got a little bit of strategy, but it's kind of fanficky. Like, oh, cross count is a really good move, guys. You slide over your arm and it becomes more powerful. No, I don't really think that works. Or maybe there is something to it, but it's not Dempsey roll, which is like an actual boxing move, right? Or is like from a famous boxer, a real life boxer or something. But like, yeah, Joe is, I guess it is that kind of mecha, like unlike unlike other mecha series, this one's about the characters. It is kind of like that. I don't think I necessarily say that. But yeah, it is sort of, it's not about, it's less that like, oh, unlike other sports series, this is about the characters. It's more like, unlike other sports series, this one doesn't really care about the sport. Well, like, not like Joe doesn't care about the boxing or whatever, but it not the same way. And I don't necessarily think Hikaru no Go is saying that because the author is really into Go. I don't remember explicitly if they were a player or like a pro, or they had something a part of the game, like they were really invested. They would actually visit and go to the different tournaments and stuff like that. They were very immersed. Like, the way how Inoue would play basketball for Slam Dunk, right? But I really, and I made a comment on AniHive's video where it's like, I've been meaning to make a video with Japanese sports that they don't teach you the game, but that's totally fine. You could still get invested in the story and the characters and stuff. Akagi is a huge example of that with Mahjong. Mahjong is kind of a complicated game, and even if you've played it, like I have, they have it on 51 Club Games on my Switch. I've played Mahjong, but I'm like, I don't really know how I won. You don't understand it as intuitively, and if I tried playing it now, I would have to learn it all over again, type of deal. And the same thing with Chihai with Karata, even though I like that AniHive mentions it in the video where it's kind of like this. Although it sounds like it informs it a little more about Karata. You kind of actually understand the game better than Go ends up doing. And then another one that I haven't seen, is with Sangatsu no Lion and Shogi. I have heard from people that it's like, yeah, you might want to learn shogi, but it doesn't matter. You don't need to learn shogi in order to enjoy the show, type of deal. And it's still followable, despite you not really knowing. It's not teaching you shogi necessarily, or maybe it is. Again, I'm kind of talking out my ass in that regard. But like, if I were to, I hopefully would watch Sangatsu no Lion at some point, in order to kind of lump it into these other shows and talk about that. I think that'd be really interesting, and how the anime depict them, to still make them engrossing, right? Anyway, yeah, I enjoyed this overview pretty much. It's a overview pretty much of Hikaru no Go, the anime specifically. Doesn't really go into the manga at all, but that's fine. Yeah, I enjoyed it. A good time. Anime location quiz with kind of neat, and he's done an entire series of this by this point, and I just haven't clicked on them. I don't know why. I guess it's just I didn't recognize it really or register it. But I just happened to be in a quizzy mood recently. Um, I won't go into detail about it, but I ever since that Joe Anime Man video, if you remember a couple months back, I covered it in Digest where Joey and Garnt had a anime quiz trivia game type of thing, and I was kind of disappointed in it because it was just nothing but Naruto and I don't know, a lot of like the same titles, and it was really purely on like whether you had seen it or not, and if you hadn't, then you were fucked, you know. And it was also like time based, and there was a lot to it that I was just like, man, it could be so much better. And yeah, recently I did whip something up. I did kind of create a quiz of sorts or a format, a quiz game of sorts. Um, yeah, we'll go into detail about it because I'm pretty much done with it, but um I have to play test it, you know what I mean? I have to do all, but I'm trying to other projects first. But I just in a quizzy mood, and so probably that's what got me to check this out in this particular instance. But it's great that he's found like he's really I've said it before, but like this is definitely his niche. And you know, I'm not following every single video of his, but I've watched his videos for a number of years now. Over time, and you can tell that he's really gained a lot of experience and knowledge in this field of relating anime to real life locations. It definitely isn't surface level your name. Not that not to criticize his former videos and everything. I think those are still interesting and unique. But it wasn't as I think this in particular was really impressive the way he was able to recognize some of these locations. And this was just basically this video is a GeoGuessr, and it's a particular quiz that he's taking that like apparently are anime locations. And there's some instances where he's like, this isn't even Japan. Which, to be fair, there is a decent chunk of anime that doesn't take place in Japan. Certainly not the majority of them. Not the majority. But certainly a good chunk. Like he mentioned like one of them brought him to DC, and he's like, I don't think any anime should be in DC. That's weird. It just seems weird, right? But I don't know if I commented, but like there is an anime from Eden from that takes place in Washington DC that I know of, Eden of the East. I haven't seen it myself, but I'm familiar that it takes place there. Granted, not in the colonial setting that he. I definitely commented this. I remember. Not in the colonial place that he got dropped in, but yeah, where I think I was a little disappointed in the video, I guess, was just that like he's taking it in this somebody else's quiz, and it's not necessarily him delivering the quiz, and that's okay. Like just having the quiz, it's fine. But because it's somebody else's quiz, he's like trying to guess the anime, and if he doesn't know what it is, then he's like, oh, I don't get that point. But then we don't learn what that anime is, and he doesn't seem to either. He's like, I don't really know what that was supposed to be. And it kind of leaves it an unclosed loop that never gets closed. You know what I mean? It's not a fully satisfying video in that regard. Yeah, it's sort of just like it's like you go on a game show, the person gets it wrong, and then the audience never learns what the actual answer was. Can you imagine like Wheel of Fortune, in the final round or whatever, they fail to guess what it is within 10 seconds or whatever, and then they don't show the player or the audience what the answer is? That would be immensely unsatisfying, wouldn't it? Right? It'd be like, well, what was it? Right? How close was he? Right? Uh, so I feel like there, no, and it was nothing to do with his format because it was somebody else's quiz. They didn't provide. They're kind of like inputting these locations through GeoGuessr and giving like the list of locations, right? And there's some that you can be like, yeah, it's that happens to be a Monogatari place or Tamiyura. Actually, the place where he says it was Tamiyura, and that the Tamiyura name drop, like him saying that was just like, oh wow, okay, so he's not really. It's not just like he's not been doing like surface level, the most popular anime or anything. He's really watching a lot to be like, oh, what's an anime that takes place in this place? And he's probably looked into this sort of thing and seen it. He's really kind of opening himself up to more anime that way, which is really cool. That it just seems that way to me, and I just found that promising and exciting. Although I will say the gate, I forget the name of it, not Toby Red, but Tobey, I don't know. The red Japanese gate that was in like the water. I do know at the very least, Heike Monogatari has a scene from that. I think it was them going on vacation there, technically, and obviously it's not modern day Japan; it's ancient Japan. But I think it's that. I think it's the same one. I would imagine so. Anyway, yeah, but I just think it was really interesting format and yeah, intriguing. Anime is deep, actually. Weeb Crew had their own standalone podcast with FD Signifier. That was really cool. Really exciting to see that. And I think what was the most fun part of this podcast is just FD Signifier's curiosity and his appetite for learning, which was just, it was just so nice. And then obviously Mumi and FK Ghost being very gracious with the questions, be like, why is there so much incest? And they're like, well, right. I think they answered pretty succinctly about like, well, we don't want to do any Orientalist things. It is everywhere, like certain stuff like that. And yeah, none of their answers seemed cringe. So good job. Yeah, I think it was a really cool perspective, and I like that FB Signifier often was like, that's really interesting, or he seemed not just receptive to new information, but like actively grateful for it, or like seems to actually be absorbing it and interested in learning more. That was really encouraging to hear. There were certain things that he had questions about that I wanted to throw my 2 cents in that I think could have been answered in a particular way. But before I go to those, I did also want to mention this one comment that FD Signifier mentioned about like when you get older, you start to be a lot more self-conscious about what you make, and you're a lot more critical and you're a lot more seasoned. So you have a lot of nagging things and like, oh, they won't like that or this. Whereas is when you make art when you're younger, like you're young, late, like early 20s or whatever, you have a lot more earnestness or unwillingness to compromise on your vision or something like that, and there's something kind of pure and incredible about that. And I was just like, damn. So maybe I'm putting a little bit of words in his mouth, but I really latched onto that because I fully agree. I feel it's really hard to make videos for me right now because of the lack of self-confidence, because of a growing understanding. Like the more I learn, the more I realize I don't know type of deal, or like things that are like, well, that's not fair to say or whatever, versus I would just say it if I was younger, perhaps. I don't know, that perspective I think was really interesting. But yeah, the some of the questions he had was like what authors had more than one hit, because it feels like kind of a common thing where it's like, yeah, you make Bleach, what the hell else do you make? Oh yeah, like that's fair. I think Inoue is the perfect example of someone who made Slam Dunk, which is the highest grossing sports manga, period. Absolute phenomenon, and ended it on his terms, and even fucking directed the movie this past year himself, like from Toei, and that became like Toei's highest grossing movie of all time, I believe. What a Chad. But he also has Vagabond and Real. Like he does have other hits. It's obviously not in the degree of Slam Dunk, but he was able to kind of carve this own a different path, basically. Another really popular answer, because the only ones that Mumi and FK thought of were Togashi, yep, Fujimoto, yeah, to an extent, for sure. I think his stuff's he's still pretty new, I think. And Ishimi, who's the Akanohana, Blood on the Tracks, Inside Mari. Yeah, definitely. But I have the whole list, but I was just like, there's a lot of like really big names that are plenty successful. And obviously, they are ultimately right. There are definitely more mangaka that have one hit than ones that have 6, 5, 4, 2. Certainly. But I would say that there's a lot that kind of have created their own niche or their own ethos, really, that you could experience multiple different works from them, and it feels like an ethos of sorts, like Fukumoto, Nobuyuki Fukumoto, Kaiji Akagi, Kurosawa, at least those three, but there's more. Naoki Urasawa, obviously, 20th Century Boys, Master Keaton, Pluto, Billy Boy, like pretty much everything he's written. Yawara. Um, Rumiko Takahashi, kind of a big one. Kind of a, oh yeah, right. Fucking Urusei Yatsura, Ranma One Half, Inuyasha. Maybe not now. Like there's certainly certain, she's not as big as she was at one point, but that doesn't take away that she did Maison Koku right after Urusei Yatsura and still killed it. Still slayed. Mitsuru Adachi, Leiji Matsumoto. Osamu Tezuka is kind of cheating. Like, yeah, no shit. But yeah. Kurumada. I actually don't remember his first name. I just put Kurumada. It's Saint Seiya, but as well as Ring Nikakiro. And that's kind of it. But then he does have this delinquent one that he's been working on, and I think he's just finishing up recently, that I'm interested in checking out at some point. I think it's getting a French release or something like that. I don't know. I feel that really interesting. He's found his own thing, even though Saint Seiya is his biggest one, and everyone knows him for that. Ring Nikakiro is a very formative title for Shonen Jump and successful. One for both Mob Psycho and One Punch Man, although definitely not as like the kind of prolific we're looking for, I guess. It's more like he got a one-hit wonder twice, almost. But I'm like, is he working on anything right now? I have no idea, actually. I'm wondering. I assume he's still working on One Punch Man, technically. I don't know if he's necessarily doing the webcomic, and then Murata is still adapting it. I'm not really sure. Obata and Oba for Death Note and Bakuman, even though, of course, they fell off. Like, I get it. And then definitely a mangaka you haven't heard of, Shinji Mizushima, because none of his stuff's ever really been translated, and I think one of them got an anime, kind of. Yeah, I think so. But he wrote this story called Okaben, this manga called Okaben, that hopped around a lot of different magazines. It's not a consistent run, but it collectively is 200 volumes. But that's like, oh yeah, that's the one. No, and then he wrote this other series called Obsan, which is a different baseball series. The Dokuben is like a sports, kind of mostly baseball. And then Obsan's also baseball, and that is 100 volumes. The dude has 200-volume stories. like that. I still don't know another manga that has that. I don't. Do you? I'd love to hear it in the comments. I really do not know. 200 volumes stories. Different stories. And I would say that there's definitely a lot more. They're right about manga that's more common with manga. Because anime, there's a lot of directors that have a whole body of work rather than one-hit wonders. There are still some one-hit wonders. And the thing is, you never hear about them. The ones that I'm like, oh yeah, I'm the director of One Piece. It's, first of all, there's multiple directors of One Piece, I know. But it's sort of like, there's a lot of directors who you find out that, oh, they've done a lot of different stuff. Oh my gosh. Like, I only just realized Osamu Nabashima, who is, I'm pretty sure that's his name. I've been watching Saint Tail, and there was an episode that was really, really good, and I wanted to see who was episode directing it, because maybe it was some kind of like bigger, like more talented name, because it stuck out. And it is the series director who directs that episode. And I'm like, what else has he done? The series director for Saint Tail. Right afterwards, he did Clamp School Detectives, which was like, oh yeah, obviously. But then after that, I believe right after that, close, Hamtaro. Oh, like the whole Hamtaro series. And now he's working on Yowamushi Pedal. He's been the Yowamushi Pedal guy this whole time. It's like, wow, okay, I would never have pegged it. I would have never expected that. It's really interesting. And he has this kind of his own prolific thing going on, but he's next to no name recognition in comparison to these other guys. I don't know. But then of course, but like the real question that I got kind of stuck in my craw almost, and I kind of took it a little too seriously, probably. But FT Signifier's major reason for leaving anime pretty much was that so many of them don't have endings. So many of them you just get blue balled and you never season 2 of the thing. And that's a valid complaint. Sure. I think for certainly a good number of titles. I so what happened, right? I was like, challenge accepted, and I wrote a list. This is not comprehensive, obviously. Not even, but it's like I just took from my list the titles that I literally went through my list and like, that has an ending, 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 that has an ending. I went through all of those, and that's not even complete. I literally just like stopped halfway through my 2 cores before I was like, this is stupid. But this was all the ones that like, these you should watch if you want an anime with a complete ending. But as I was going through my list, I was like, there's plenty of these where I'm like, I'm okay if they don't have endings. They don't necessitate endings. It's these shows that like, I'm obviously scrolling them on screen, but I don't need them to have like a definitive ending or whatever. If we get more, cool, but whatever we got, that's awesome. You know what I mean? It doesn't, because of its episodic nature, or because it's so character based, or it's slice of life, it's like an everyday life sort of thing. It doesn't, or it's a comedy. There's so many instances where I'm okay with if we didn't get more, if it doesn't have an ending, right? It's not like a definitive thing for me for a lot of shows. And then there's these other ones where, honestly, they do have good endings, but there's just multiple seasons of them, or they're isolated seasons. And yeah, like, oh, it's too bad Kaiji didn't get a continuation. Where's season 3 of Kaiji? But like, I don't think you should be discouraged to not check it out, especially, you know, manga is still going. Like, sure, maybe they have a point, but like, I think Kaiji's a really good example of that. Like, I think you should still watch it regardless. And yeah, I think the individual seasons are great, even though the endings of them kind of leave it open where you could conceivably do more. They don't have like, that's the end type of deal. But then, yeah, I did list the ones where, yeah, you're right. No, all right, I'm waiting for the ending too. No, I get it. Where's the second? You know, some of these, you know, is what it is. It's this case with the manga as well, or with a good number of with several of these, the manga did end, but it is in such a place where it's like, that's really not a, you know what I mean? I was kind of expecting an ending with these titles, and I didn't really get that. Or it did get a really deliberate continuation, and you could have ended it. You really could have, but you didn't. So it's like, yeah, okay, you're right about these titles, sure. But yeah, so I mean, and then around that time I was like, yeah, I'm gonna stop. This is stupid. Because there's some anime on my list that don't really fall into any of those categories. I don't know how to feel about them because it's the anime original ending. Like, how do you feel about Soul Eater? Because like, the manga is complete. It's a total thing, but the anime isn't. The anime is kind of anime original at the moment. Didn't really get a, you know, but it does have an ending, but it's anime original, right? There's certain titles where that's kind of weird and up in the air. The nuanced topic, I think. But it was sort of like, these anime don't get endings. I was just like, not all of them. I've been vibing. Not to say you have to vibe or whatever, but yeah, I don't know. It was a lot of food for thought. It was a great listen. I really enjoyed it. All right. Now, what I thought were the best videos of the week. Those are a lot of the best videos of the week. And the first one's from Manga Crash, the mangaka that doesn't exist. Who wrote Death Note? And this was a spicy topic for me because I had my own theory that you didn't bring up. Because you were like, the fans have three and I have to tell you, the pretty much the bulk of this video felt a lot like my Slam Dunk video, where it was from the perspective of like, this is why you should care about this mysterious aspect of this show, and a kind of more of an outsider, like a metatextual subject. It's not really directly about the anime or manga itself. And then going into the fan theories and then kind of showing your process of like how you kind of logicked your way, like how to figure and build the theory up that the author of Death Note and Bakuman are this former mangaka, the former mangaka of Lucky Man. And, you know, I will say, this whole time, I don't know how much the other, because it's not just you posing this theory, it's other people. And there were some people who straight up knew before Death Note was like a major success, like before it was even a one shot apparently, that there was like, oh yeah, it's the manga for Lucky Man, which like there was no evidence for. Like, how do you read that? And then then the evidence would show up in both Bakuman and Death Note. Um, right. So that was that was a surprise. That certainly was really interesting, and I really like that aspect of the video. Um, but it is sort of like no one checks Lucky Man. They've perused it, right? They kind of look at it a little bit, but no one's watching the anime. Nobody is trying to peruse the actual manga to see if there's any sorts of connections or ideas, because you would think, oh, they're so different from Death Note and Bakuman. How would you ever find some connection in the storytelling of these titles to be like, oh yeah, that's the author. It's the same guy. Like, I think that's just a safe assumption, and maybe that's why nobody checks it. But also, obviously, it's hard to get it. It's not translated. I understand. Doesn't mean it's not available. I haven't checked actually whether it's available or not in the way that I get things. But anyway, um, that was like, it was not that that was a flaw of the video or anything. It was just something like, eh. But I will share my own theory because it leans into that idea of like, okay, um, what if you looked at the story itself? If it's a former author of a different manga, if they had experience, they're not just some newbie, and it is a pen name for somebody else. Um, what other series could they have worked on? I don't know. You know what? You know what? I do know. You know. You know what? So I was watching Hikaru no Go, yeah. And that author, it's a writer artist team duo again. It's Obata um who is doing the art, and not Oba. It's a different author, but this author, I believe it's a she. Um, this author doesn't go on to write anything else. They only do Hikaru no Go, and I don't know if they even did anything beforehand, but like it was just Hikaru no Go, and then stopped. And then shortly afterwards, they both do. I don't. I made the I just assumed my theory was real, and then shortly after, Obata starts Death Note, and I will say, at the time when I first thought of this, I didn't know that Oba was a mystery. I actually had no idea. I knew Obata was the same guy as Death Note, whatever. I didn't make an assumption that it was the same person, whatever. Funny enough, I think this happened after the fact, right? Sai in Hikaru no Go is voiced by the same dub actor as Light Yagami. So there is sort of an Obata connection, not just in the art, but in anime. The dub voice actor for Light is the same for Sai, the ghost main character. I thought that was really interesting. But yeah, fucking, there's a point in Hikaru no Go towards the second half, maybe into the 2/3 mark or so, where it really felt like Death Note. It genuinely felt like mystery thriller, tension, the kind of scenario that Death Note really built itself around, and that Hikaru no Go didn't necessarily had built itself around, but seemed to evolve or grow into. I mean, the idea of a ghost figure that only the character can see, kind of having a manipulation and having this almost supernatural effect on the story. Obviously, there's more supernatural things in Death Note, right, than Hikaru no Go, but makes you wonder, makes you think. I don't know. There was things about Hikaru no Go in the writing, not necessarily in Obata's art, that really made it feel like Death Note, the subsequent work. And then I just see that like the author of Hikaru no Go doesn't write anything afterwards, apparently, and nobody knows the author of Death Note, and we don't know if it's man or woman. It's a pen name. I will say there is more evidence, it seems, to Lucky Man's author, Gosha or something. Certainly, but it just makes you interesting. It's interesting. It's just so I just wanted to share my theory about that. But I will say what makes it kind of a best video for me is that trajectory, the way you kind of built the mystery along the way, as well as just being on camera the whole time and having that partial editing. I think I don't know how new the angle is. I'm not watching every video of yours, but previous videos I've seen, you were at an angle like this or like whatever. And now it's like kind of more front facing. We know we have the same shelves. I commented this in the video. We have the same shelves apparently. It's like, oh, interesting. Yeah, though, that was very. But I just really like that mystery and very thought provoking, and I think the presentation was really efficient and effective and arresting. Yeah, really liked it. KrisPNatz had a fun video for Bi Visibility Day talking about 23 bi anime recommendations. And he does a kind of a rapid fire at the beginning and at the end. But then the bulk of it is him kind of going show by show, giving a variety of reasons why it's good for bisexual anime fans. Not necessarily like like these anime are bi, the characters are canonically bi or something. I think the best argument he had about his recommendation, right? He's not like making a court case or something. It's recommendations. But I think the best one he talked about was that kind of reframed it. Oh, this is the kind of thing he's talking about is Yu Yu Hakusho. And apparently he got like flamed when he first put a video like this out talking about like Yu Yu Hakusho being bisexual. And or Yusuke particularly. But it wasn't that like, oh, Yusuke likes guys and Yusuke likes girls and therefore whatever. It's more about the mentality of bisexuality and struggling with that. So a duality sense, the way that Yusuke towards the latter half of the series, whatever the thing that happens to him very late in the show, that's kind of a reveal of sorts. I won't really say it out loud because he tags it as a spoiler, and it's like the only spoiler warning he gives for any of the recommendations. So I'll be courteous, even though it's Yu Yu Hakusho. But the thing that happens with Yusuke that's very much a reveal or a revelation towards the end of the show makes it a lot more about duality and accepting a part of yourself, and it's the mentality behind it, and less so I like boys and girls. Right? Like that's always, I feel like that's often what bisexuality is depicted as, and it's true to an extent, it seems. But I really like that KrisPNatz is coming as a bisexual person, coming from their perspective, but and their take on it. But then yeah, I always really like his enthusiasm and energy, and I really especially like the format of this one where he's almost on screen the entire time, and he's just kind of like sitting at the corner of his bed, it seems, just like on his phone, like really close up with his face and just talking. Maybe he just has like the list in front of him, but like just rattling off like what he likes about these shows, and as a bisexual, whether that's the characters themselves being like that or having that energy, I think as he coins it. Yeah, him talking about but then the real surprise and what made it this really fun and engaging is he is very cultured. I'm just really pleased where you see an anime fan who demonstrates their versatility in what they've seen, not just the sheer number of anime, but he talks about stuff from the 90s. He's talking about stuff from all these different genres. He's talking about stuff of different popularity. That's a big hole for me, actually. I like to think that I'm pretty well cultured in terms of genre and period of time, that I want to watch a good number of stuff from the 70s and the 80s, but I'm very clout chasey. I choose a lot of titles that are fan favorites, popular. I also don't really want to watch mid, so like that's another that's another thing about it. That's like I want to steer towards the things that I hear very good things about. So but like I usually am picking a lot of more popular stuff, usually. But he's straight up talking about some stuff from the 2020s and 2010s that I just have never heard of. And it's just like nothing seasonal that I would not take a second look at. I just would never, ever watch. Not because they're gay or something like that, that they're bisexual or something like that. It's just that like a harem, or it's a sports some sports thing or whatever. But there's a lot of like he's like, oh my gosh, Major is one of my favorite anime. Um, and I have to tell you, only the real diehard, only the true anime fans have seen Major, and like have Major as like a favorite. And it does feel like every time anybody who has seen Major, it's like one of their favorite shows. And like, no, I haven't seen Major. I'm very looking forward to watching Major and be like, yeah, you should absolutely watch Major. Like I'm fully expecting to be one of those people. Um, but that was just really encouraging to see, the kind of sheer variety of shows that he was recommending, and the way he was recommending them. He's not necessarily making any arguments about these characters or by, and more of just like the way that they act, and certain other characters, their presence in the show was really appealing to him as a bisexual. And so I think that approach was really personal and engrossing, and not like predictable at all, and not like disagreeable either, because it's not really like, oh come on, he's not bi, he doesn't make it about that really. He just kind of, he decouples it from that. He's not making that kind of argument. It's more of just like for the sake of having the best possible time with this stuff, which he's encouraging people to watch anime, and I love that. So it's sort of, yeah, I really like this video a lot, and I really like the energy. It was a really fun time. Always great videos from him. Always great. Seriously. When the ones I choose to watch, but yeah. GAIJINGUY, also a regular best best component. Leiji Matsumoto's first sci-fi manga, Conquest of Space. And again, he's here for the similar reasons the way he's usually here, because I really like his seasoned perspective, his less YouTubery kind of perspective. Although I think I've noticed in this video that he had a little more confidence in being a YouTuber, I guess, of just being excited to have an audience that is appreciating what he's doing. There's just something about his energy this time that was just, he was like really excited to get on camera and be like, hey guys, and let me show you this thing. And he seems to be having a lot more fun. Not that he wasn't having fun in his other videos, of course, but I don't know, just the enthusiasm was exuding it a bit more. But maybe also because like he's talking about Leiji Matsumoto, which I assume is one of his favorite authors, if not his favorite, and he's doing his entire series about him. And I obviously love his focus, and I'm very interested in Leiji's stuff, and not simply the 3-9, here's Harlock, here's yada. Like I think this is really monumentous, and the fact that I had never heard of this manga before, for it being his first sci-fi manga, and it's a one-shot basically. It's what we consider a one-shot now, but it's a rental book. And he talked about shopping it out and the history of it, of him selling it and everything. But really the bulk of the video is just put the book, have the book open it up and flip through it and be like, and point at some of he kind of loosely goes over what the story is, like, oh, they does this, and kind of summarizing it from beginning to end, which is fine, because it's like, that's what we should be here for this particular subject, where it's one volume, one shot, and never heard of it before, probably not translated, I don't think so. I'm not necessarily looking for an analysis or anything. I think it's cool to just go through the story kind of loosely and just surface level, like overview, and be like, yeah, you can see his technique here. Oh, he did the scroll part. He would do that a lot in his later works, and this is one of the earliest implementations of him doing that. And, in certain aspects, and then pointing things out that, like, as a, not like a die-in-the-wool Leiji Matsumoto guy, he's like pointing it out, and it's like, oh yeah, he does do that a lot. Or it's like, that is a trope of his. And I liked at the end, he put it this like Leiji bingo. And for like reading through it, it felt kind of surface level, or kind of like, again, what a lot of these other anime old guard and critics have done in the past, where they just kind of boil him down to, this is how you can comprehend him. This is how you can compartmentalize it in your head, that like, this is him, this is Leiji, you get it. But like, I like that the bingo tropes and little bits that, like, oh, he has that in his thing, they're just like small observations that that are not trying to make a grander point about something. It's just like a thing that he does. Like, I like that two of the boxes are like insect people but hot. You know, or like this other thing but hot or whatever. um that was funny. Like certain things like that, I think the focus of that was interesting, to try to like to not psychoanalyze him or anything like that, and not just be tropey of like, yes, he does share his characters among universes, etc. But it felt very specific. I don't know. But yeah, I really liked the structure of the video, the way this video went with him physically in person, like flipping through the whole thing, like piece by piece, and kind of pointing stuff out. It was done in like one take, so it kind of felt almost like a convention type of, like you would see this at a convention panel or something, and he's just kind of going through it live. Um, and he's like messing up sometimes, so it's like, oh, did I miss something? No, no, there's not a lot of cutting. It's not polished in the same way. But like again, I think I may have mentioned in a previous video of his, but it feels like you went over his house and he's just talking to you about this stuff, and it's like feels real and like in person, very YouTubey in that regard. So yeah, I really enjoyed it. Great stuff as always. And lastly, CynicClinic, I'll give him the best video of the week, just because it was just so admirable for me, where I was thinking like, oh, that's like that was his one video, and I'm gonna try again with his next video in terms of success or whatever. But I really like that he's leaning in more and having more of as a follow-up video to his previous idea of what's up with school roof scenes in anime, and the quickness of which he put this video out in relation to the last one is promising as well. Because it gives me the vibe of what I was wanting to do 2 years ago at this point. I had this idea of like, it would be far simpler videos, stripped down, minimal visuals, kind of like what Zen Huxtable would do, where whenever he does a kind of a essay type thing, he only puts what's absolutely necessary, but sometimes he just leaves the screen blank or whatever, and he's just talking. I really wanted to make more videos like that, and they have a loose connection to each other. We're like, oh, well, maybe I'll talk about that next week. This like a running thought process or something, and that would make it more regular or something. We keep saying something, I guess. Sorry, but yeah, this felt really cool, where this is kind of leading into different points, and having this loose connection of stuff that he's really interested in, and it feels like you're developing and studying along with him, almost, where yeah, it's like you're kind of following that thought process, where it's like, oh, speaking of roofs, why didn't they do that anymore? And they're looking more into the roof stuff and the reasons why it might not have been. And I think it's a lot of stuff that I probably already knew, but again, it's still great to see in a thoughtful, concentrated way, and obviously in a polished way too. I'm noticing that he's stripped back in terms of the bells and whistles on the video. He's not on green screen in this one. It's in one location instead of hopping multiple locations. It's not as inventive in the same way, but I guess the focus of it, and just having that experience in the back that he's capable of doing that sort of thing, but still like honing in on this way, I think it's really, really great. I think obviously all the research that he's doing, and different examples and stuff, like the kind of the smattering of examples doesn't feel narrow or stilted. I guess it doesn't feel like stifling, or I don't know what the like fil like filtered water. Like, when like it all tastes kind of flat and stale in the same kind of grouping. It just doesn't feel like anime, right? I don't know. It just feels like there's some times where like people are trying to like are giving a wide thing of different anime stuff, and this it feels very blobby. It doesn't feel like, what show is that? It's like, wait, what? It feels like they typed in anime roof and it's just some show, right? But I like that all the examples that CynicClinic's bringing up are shows that we're recognizing, are familiar with. It's not generalizing. He's citing the shows in particular, I guess, or I don't know. It just feels a lot more purposeful and not simply like, anime rooftops. I'm not gonna call no YouTubers out. I don't really think I can. I'm not gonna. I don't want to generalize anyway, but I don't think I'd be able to. It feels like there are some anime YouTubers who are being like, "Oh, I need to think of a video. Oh, what do I make? Oh," and they choose dubs, fantasy worlds, genres. Yeah, they're just kind of making catch-alls, and then they're gonna give their little takes. What's the deal with animation genres? Or something like that, right? This could be like that. I can see somebody like making a video like this, but the difference here is quality. It is the use of examples. It's the citations with real world, thinking deeper and thinking more locally and what they're from their experience. It's appreciating the psychology of the viewer and their own biases, perhaps. It has humor. It's not just like pot shots at anything. It's not compliment. It's not severe compliments or discouragements in one way or the other. He's not making any judgment calls. It's perfect. It's what you want. What I was saying earlier, that it feels stripped back. I was just remembering that I did watch the premiere of this. I do remember this one really nice edit of like highlighting Japanese text and the highlight would become English. Beautiful. Like that's such a brilliant idea. Like a fucking course. Lovely. And so it's like really great attention to detail and it's still a polished video despite it not having a ton of bells and whistles. Yeah, and I like that a lot. I'm a big fan of that. I like the subtle match cuts and little it's the little things. Yeah. I really enjoyed it. Thanks for continuing to make stuff and being a superior peer. All right, that'll do it for that installment of AniTube Digest. Thank you very much for watching. This is not the third take I've done. Have a great week. Yo, peace.